Well, I'm back online and I have some things that I've noticed about this situation of the 62 million figure. And first of all, I want to extend my love and respect to the women survivors who are being referred to in this episode. May they be safe and well and free from harm. And now their very personal stories are being publicly discussed around the world, and I'm about to contribute to that. So know that all that I'm about to say is dedicated to the restoration of the feminine inside of us all. And I am, of course, talking about the documentary that CNN made about the cases of men drugging their wives and violently sexually assaulting them while they're unconscious, filming it, live streaming it, and selling tickets basically to the defilement of the woman that they claim to love, and in some cases were married to for about 20 years and had children with. And they learned how to do all of that via online training chat groups that a journalist coined as the Online Rape Academy, because it did involve a curriculum with steps of how to be a violent perpetrator. And before I get into it, just know that I tend to have pretty contextualized views on these matters because ending violence against women has been a theme in my life from the start. And really, all of my work with thousands of women over the past 25 plus years has ultimately been about recovery from trauma and learning how to thrive beyond it. And all of it contributes to violence prevention, to living beyond our programming, to embody the sacredness of who we truly are. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Dévashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. So 62 million views in just 28 days is a figure that sounded the alarm internationally for people to discuss what I'm sure we all didn't really know was such a widely practiced form of abuse, which of course Giselle Pellico's case brought attention to in recent years, right? But in the correction of the stats, I read how the porn sites in particular have incentives to inflate their traffic numbers for advertising um, revenue to make money. And so bot traffic on adult sites is apparently well known in that industry. But even if the real human traffic to that motherless.com website were more like 20 million instead of 62 million, in terms of the views and the hits, the underlying reality of it all is still extremely alarming. And of course, there was the predictable statements being thrown around of not all men, which, in my opinion, is such a thinly veiled shame and avoidance of accountability, including shame for not feeling the impulse for men to hold each other accountable. Um, and for me, I was already aware of the CNN documentary, but after almost a month away offline, I came back when the outrage was at its peak, along with some misinformation and the usual lack of concern for women, for men to save face. But fortunately, I did notice that there is more men speaking up about this than I've usually witnessed over the past decades of violent crimes against women. So that's definitely a great thing to see. Um, and I've also noticed that there's been plenty of confusion and overwhelm about how this situation could possibly even be happening. And I hope that what I have to share today can support that. I've also noticed a lot of women telling their stories of past assault and abuse on social media because their own trauma is resurfacing when trying to process this horribly depraved situation that CNN have highlighted. And I understand all of these responses. The emotion is so legitimate. And within it all is as well a lesson to be learned, as usual, about not getting information from each other on social media and instead going to the source. Regardless of that, the alarm expressed is totally warranted, right? Another thing I noticed actually is that it's really great to see more men and women both educating about what patriarchy really is, in that it's a systemic issue and it's not just a reference to men. I've definitely noticed more and more people defining this, sharing this, circulating that message because of this horrible case. And that is definitely a win out of it all. And, when I started to write out my own take on it to share it with you here, I started to realize that this could be a whole book in itself. So I'm going to do my best to share my evaluations, but just knowing that I can't possibly fit it all into one podcast episode, it's probably going to need to be a few. And the this sort of analysis that I'm going into, it's not just about this online rape academy scenario. It's it's beyond that. It's more the underpinnings, where it's coming from and why, and how that's part of the entire patriarchal sex paradigm, actually. And I've got to say, I've become increasingly just kind of put off by Facebook and Instagram. So I'm looking forward to sharing more substantial writing on Substack. I do already have a Substack account, but I haven't really activated it. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And if you're interested in what you hear in this episode, know that there's going to be a more in-depth version of it over on Substack if you want to go and connect with me there. So, coming to my personal take, um, what I felt when I looked at the figures and the information that CNN shared with everyone, I felt deep sadness. And it was so overwhelming that it just ended up moving pretty swiftly into compassion for everyone in it, especially the women, of course, but also for the men to be so far from their true nature and for everyone to have to suffer from that. And I've noticed that I'm personally not getting stuck in outrage over these things anymore, probably because I'm so damn sick of it and I want to help work towards transmuting it entirely, as in the entire abuse cycle. So my take is about facilitating that longer term outcome. But before I get into that, I really want you to have it known very clear from me that I believe men should be held fully accountable for their criminal behaviors. I do not believe in shielding men from the consequences of their own actions in these situations. And actually, that in itself is an enormous part of violence prevention, is when we're willing to not shield them from it. I actually believe there needs to be much stronger legal sentencing to support violence prevention. And so what I'm presenting next, it's not intended instead of that, it's more alongside it. And just to say a little more about uh, reporting men for their violent crimes, I'm actually a pretty serious advocate of this. When women let me know about their um, domestic violence situations where they truly are uh, victims, survivors of violence, I thoroughly recommend involving the legal system, because when men don't have the self-control or self-awareness to correct themselves, we do need to enlist a third party to make them correct themselves. And I have found it over the years, many, many, many years, to be particularly common in spiritual women to not report male violence I understand there could be, legitimate situations where it's more dangerous for a woman to do so, but outside of those scenarios, I have seen that spiritual women, due to what I think is misguided New Age views of being unconditionally loving, they I just don't think it's that loving. It's not. It's not the truth. The most loving thing to do is to do what needs to be done to help someone to end their karmic cycle and stop harming others along the way, and making sure that someone who's harmed you as a woman is not being shielded from the consequences of their own actions. So, with the performance of spirituality that's carried on with in the modern pseudo-spiritual space socially, it ends up being more about how she's perceived by others than her genuinely caring about his life path or her own or the other women that he will inevitably harm when he hasn't had to face real consequences. And these are not just words, this is, you know, lived wisdom from my own situations and witnessing so many others in it as well. And there is a trigger warning that I want to give before I get into my transpersonal view for today, because whenever a woman is in an acute stage of recovery from abuse, or if you feel like your past trauma is very active right now because of this CNN case, what I'm about to say may not be the right timing for you to hear this. And this is so important to know, and I want you to make sure that I feel very strongly about this as well, that timing is vital for post-trauma explorations. Um, Another way of saying it is that feeling coerced into non-dual awareness when your need for physical safety is so paramount is something I just really don't recommend. And so, but here we are on a podcast, and I'm not guiding you in one-on-one attuned trauma recovery right now. So, I'm about to invite you into a wider lens with a transpersonal view on the situation that I believe really can contribute to the longer term outcomes that are needed here to prevent and even end violence against women. So it seems to me when I looked into this sleep content online rape academy scenario is that the desire to rape an unconscious woman is surely the inability and unwillingness in a man to relate with a real woman due to him being sexually uninitiated and far from psychologically individuated. It also says within it that she, the woman, probably hasn't been showing up in the relationship as her full self for her own empowerment, because women are so often socialized to self-suppress and downplay their authenticity to stay in relationship. And this very typically enables patriarchal sex, where the man isn't experiencing her real energy and neither is she. And the whole thing also speaks to me of the men who are being perpetrators in this scenario. They are unconsciously wanting to return to their infant in utero state of being passively connected to their biological mother, whose body is a microcosm of the universe. And this means that he wants to be with her and on her and inside of her, and he can't get away from her at the same time. So, this contempt of her seems like a hatred towards women. But what I think he's actually wanting is to destroy how much he needs her. And what this is saying is that women are enormously powerful. The feminine, the divine mother is all. And the talk of men needing initiation that happens a lot in psychological, spiritual awareness spaces, the talk about it has got to move into real embodied action now. Because apparently the whole paradigm of sleep content and all of that is something that is attracting higher numbers of men. And also, women need to be facilitating this initiation of men. But what I know from being a woman who's, worked in and had a leadership position in the female embodied sexuality space for decades is that even those women who believe they are working with conscious eros are often lost in it themselves. And I know that's not going to make me very popular to say that, but I'm saying it because it's the freaking truth. So when I was looking at the online rape academy situation, I started to feel like I wished I could speak to the women survivors of this trauma to ask their experience of what intimacy was usually otherwise like with these men that they were partnered with or married to, and how congruent they are as women in their way of being in the relationship. I wished I had the opportunity to ask these questions and go into that more. And so I watched the documentary to see if any more of that info was revealed. And actually, it was. Enough was said to confirm what I know to be true about that dynamic. And to quote one of the women, she says, "We worry about who's coming behind us, walking down the street, or who's even friending us on Facebook. We worry about going to our car late at night in a car park, but we don't worry about who we lie next to. I didn't realize I had to." And also, she said, at the end of a very busy day, I was just grateful I had a cup of tea before I went to bed because I was so tired and didn't have to make it. So, this typical scenario of an over-functioning, overdoing, overgiving woman who's not truly receiving, not truly presencing herself, not really getting, um, any real reflection of her value in relationship is just kind of running on empty, exhausted as her, on a good day kind of state, right? And these words from Zoe Watts, who is a survivor of this abuse at the hands of her husband, she said she later saw all the videos that he had made of violently raping her while she was unconscious and drugged by the man she trusted. And whether it was her or another one of the women, another quote was, "He did seem like Mr. Perfect, but there was an undercurrent throughout the marriage." Now, this shows that she was aware for quite some time um, that something was off, and this speaks to how women are habituated to endure and normalize what no woman should, but it's culturally embedded to do so. And over a 5-year period, this is from the CNN article, it says Stanhope said she would often fall asleep without remembering how and would wake up to bruises on her body and in different clothes with a towel under her without any memory as to why. She would often fall asleep without remembering how. So after waking up a few times to her partner violently raping her, she knew something was wrong and asked him to stop. So not only did she suspect something, she was actually experiencing it, consciously aware enough that it was happening, and yet trapped in this cycle that she couldn't quite get out of until she did. And when I checked her social media profile, she speaks in much more depth and detail about signs of coercive control that were showing up early on in the relationship, like from the start, which of course she wasn't able to identify until later because that's how it often happens. Women aren't educated about this. Society is only just starting to have proper definitions around what coercive control even is. Everyone needs to understand what these behaviors typically look like to be able to identify it when it's coming at us or happening to someone that we know. Or, when a woman's elation out of being love bombed is being noticed by a friend or a family member, we need to apply caution in these situations and not just go along with the delusion and the fantasy. And I know people get worried that any focus on the woman in these scenarios sounds like victim blaming. So, what I want to say is that for myself as a survivor of violent abuse, I can tell you that where I'm coming from in sharing this is the opposite of victim blaming. In fact, it's about liberation for a woman to, when she's ready, look at how she can be part of violence prevention through becoming a version of herself that, for the most part, will not encounter such situations again because of who she is, because of how she is, because of her depth of relationship with herself, because of her learning how to no longer tolerate what no woman should be tolerating and normalizing. So it's essential for an embodied woman to feel that alignment in herself, to be thriving post trauma. And it was great to see that this wasn't just an assumption, um, that the women were already being shown signs of something not being right about these men before the drugging incidents, because the women confirmed it themselves in their own testimony. And when it plays out like this, a woman's conditioned self-suppression and her not being in her full agency, men relating with her are never experiencing the full sovereign feminine presence. And sex becomes a performance. And both people are basically masked behind their assumed roles. And the man mistakes her compliance for intimacy. And he gets increasingly unable to tolerate real feminine energy when it does appear. And this is where the work that I've been doing with women for decades becomes relevant in violence prevention, because it is for women about learning to not let things slide. It's about developing a relationship of real respect with herself and an actually intimate relationship with her own body, not just being the overgiving mother or partner who's checked out from herself, because it's such a patterned way that women are socialized. The conditioning in that is actually detrimental for everyone, not just her. And this is something really important, because what it means is that the real thing of embodying female power is absolutely essential for correcting the entire terrain of the abusive dynamics between men and women. And on the side of the men, a man capable of that behavior with the Rape Academy stuff, he hasn't done the inner work to encounter the feminine within himself. So he can't encounter it authentically outside of himself either. And the unconscious woman becomes then the perfect object because she doesn't require anything of him psychologically. She can't mirror back his inadequacy. And so there's no real encounter and no risk of being truly seen. It's a pseudo form of intimacy and the form of connection that he's coercing her into having without any demands of actual intimacy. And as I was looking into this, and I straight away was really alarmed, not just by the entire thing, but the name Motherless, the motherless.com website where these videos are hosted. I wanted to look into it further because I wondered if I was assuming too much. But then I saw the taglines for like sleep content, which is apparently its own genre. And actually, the main tagline for the Motherless website is "She's not looking," which implies doing something bad when mum is not watching. And some other terms on the site were "porn wives that don't know that they are," and "go ahead, she'll never know." And I noticed search terms like "passed out girls" and "sleeping beauties." So obviously, it's the small boy in him doing something forbidden the moment his mother leaves the room, like a primal experience of transgression that's exciting to him, and where the pleasure is tied to the absence of her gaze. And this means the arousal that's sold through this website, it's not just a sexual thing, it's the thrill of maternal disapproval that he's narrowly escaping. And the excitement is inseparable from the danger in it, which means the mother is actually present in the fantasy, but with her eyes closed. She's the silent audience whose non-witnessing makes the act possible and charged. If you've been enjoying the contemplations from listening to the episodes of this podcast and you're ready to take things to the next step, to actually be living beyond patriarchal sex in your life, in your relationship, whether that's one you're in now or one you'd like to be in future, if you are a woman, if you're a man, if you're a couple, do feel free to reach out. There's a no obligation connection call that I welcome you to. And also, if you're a woman that wants to integrate the embodied knowledge that leads to more women being able to live beyond patriarchal sex and more, also the connection call is to inquire about training as well. So I look forward to hearing from you. And obviously, everyone, a healthy adult man does not organize his sexuality around whether his mother is watching or not. The fact that this framing works, though, as a marketing ploy, and that it activates something enticing to a large enough audience for it to even be a tagline, "She's not looking," this tells us something about the developmental state of that audience, right? Her eyes are closed. She can't see, she can't judge, she cannot disapprove or express her preferences. She's the mother and the partner, but blinded. And the tagline and the content are psychologically the same fantasy: to do the forbidden thing to the feminine while the feminine cannot witness it. So the excitement and shame are locked in together. So whoever named and branded this website, they're not just selling pornography, they're selling like a temporary relief from the maternal gaze. And that's a much more compelling and addictive product, I imagine, than just pornographic abuse content in general. And the disdain for the feminine within it connects directly to the manosphere, which says that this is not just the individual dysfunction of the men involved in the online rape academy, the few thousand men or so of them that are documented, at least, knowing that there's way, way, way more. It's dangerous because there's a shared identity built around contempt for the women, like an actual community that reinforces it and escalates it. The eye check videos are like almost trophy-like in proving dominance over a helpless woman. And so in this, the sleeping woman is a symbol that's not just about sex, it's about total control with zero feminine agency or resistance. So it's eliminating her autonomy entirely, where it's the woman who cannot judge, reject, or have power over him. And that's the ultimate inversion of being under a powerful mother's gaze. So, where the communal aspect of it all makes it basically worse is that it transforms this being an individual pathology thing into a whole culture of degradation. And that's harder to dismantle than just working with individual man. So the whole thing, right? It's not a random case of depravity. It has identifiable social and psychological roots. But what I'm interested in this is how, if understanding that, how that could then help address um, different approaches in therapy and even criminology and other areas of where people are actively working towards prevention of violence. So, this is what I mean by my long-term view in ending violence against women, because unless we're willing to get it like really at the root of why it goes on, the cycle is just going to keep on happening. And obviously, if the ways to help prevent it are being applied and it's not only happening in force, but is increasing in number, something is amiss. Something has not been understood to the degree that it needs to be. And to say a bit more on this regressed state of a man to his infant in utero state, um, and trying to conjure this relationship with his mother's body once again, it's about wanting that total merging without separateness. So when he's in the in utero state, when anyone is, it's a place of passively receiving without having to perform or initiate anything, and he's experiencing a woman's body as the universe inside his mother, all providing with no demand for reciprocity. And he can take and take and take and consume with no end to it. So the unconscious woman in these scenarios really would remind a man of that pre-individuated state or the in utero state where she's warm and she's there, but she's making no demands of him whatsoever. And, apparently this is what Freud described as the memory of boundaryless union with the mother's body before the terror of separateness began. So, the deep tragedy in this is that what the men are reaching towards, the primal sense of being held by the universe, is known in mystical spiritual traditions as a legitimate impulse and a real psychological hunger. It's just detrimental that it's being expressed through violation of another rather than through him doing the inner work that could actually satisfy that profound ache in him. And all of that goes on inside of a wider culture that doesn't just not initiate boys and men into manhood, it trains them how to be perpetrators, whether through an online rape academy or through the normalization of especially typical porn that always has some violence, in that it's not about real relating with women's desire and women's autonomy. So, all that's being said here is relevant to not just these sleep drugging violations, it's relevant to the whole paradigm of patriarchal sex. And also, our culture on a wider level is not just not teaching men how to metabolize the feminine within, it teaches boys and men to repress and feel disdain for the feminine. This is what a lot of people have been talking about in recent years. Fortunately, there's more awareness around this now. And women are also not being taught how to hold men accountable to genuine relationship. Instead, women are taught to self-suppress by making themselves small enough to not trigger masculine fragility. And from there, the woman's unconscious body becomes the object, a screen onto which all of his unresolved material is projected. So, like, completely objectifying her physically. And on the other side of male initiation, when it happens, is that when he comes back to the community as a young man, as a man, he's received differently. He's no longer seen as the identity of his mother's son. He's seen as belonging to himself. And when a man belongs to himself, he can genuinely belong to another. And this is crucial to understand here because clearly that's what's missing from the way too high number of men accessing the many different websites, not just the motherless.com, where he gets to feel powerful through degrading the feminine, which is teaching him to bring that behavior into everyday life. So, without that real initiation, modern men are remaining in their mother's orbit, hungry for feminine approval, terrified of feminine rejection, and unable to tolerate a woman's full power. And so they seek women who are smaller than them and more manageable, and they rage at women who are not. And of course, there are the women that play into this hunger through OnlyFans and such. And there's a lot of layers of conversation that can be had around that. Um, but this is perpetuating the problem for the most part. And the result of actual initiation into manhood, if it got to happen, is discovering that the feminine is not something out there over there to be controlled or worshipped, but she's a living dimension inside of himself. And when a man has done that inner work, he no longer feels threatened by a woman's full presence. And instead, he's interested in relating with her. So I want to come to the side of the women by saying that um, throughout history, being fully authentic has cost women actual survival and safety and belonging and the chance of being loved. And, women have learned to make themselves smaller for survival reasons. So the mother wound in women is defined by the way patriarchy has affected them. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. It has happened in the patriarchal context. And this is not just about the unconscious relationship with your biological mum, it's the transpersonal relationship with the feminine itself and the actual cosmic relationship with the Divine Mother. So, a woman arriving as her full self in relationship, that's going to be genuinely initiatory for a man, where her desire is not always convenient, her anger is not always comfortable, and her grief is not always short-lived, but it's real, and reality is what initiates us. But the woman can't do this without conditions of genuine safety, which is why both the initiation of men and women are interdependent on each other. So, for a man that's never met a woman's real erotic current, which let's face it is most men, he's not going to be initiated by her. It can't happen. He will experience a performance of femininity in her, which is going to confirm his unconscious belief that women are to be managed. And then that relationship becomes a collusion between the both of them where she hides and he never grows, and both actually are starved. And I've got more to say on this, moving into the most authentic realm that women could be experiencing as initiators in intimate relationship, for women's role in that. And I think it's important, even if it's going to be unpopular, to share my perspectives on this, because I don't see it being embodied in many of the women who claim to be erotically initiating men. So I might need to get to that in a separate episode to not make this one super long. What I do want to focus on here is to say a little more about this hunger in the men and the fact that the hunger itself is not wrong and bad. I saw a lot of people commenting about the hungry ghost in men and its consuming of the feminine energy in women, and that's absolutely true. But the thing is, the hunger itself isn't the problem. It's because it's being directed at a victim instead of towards his own genuine transcendence. And that can happen through deep relational presence, through deep spiritual contemplative practice, and potentially through conscious eros with a really aligned embodied woman. So these paths can offer a man the ego death that is being searched for. But what's required is for the man to be the one who surrenders, not his coercing of the woman to surrender to him. And this is so key to comprehend in the case of this sleep genre, Sleeping Beauties. And I say what I'm about to say now as support and hope, even for women, because it's extremely overwhelming to be in the position of believing that so many men hate us, like literally hate, loathe, want to destroy us. And the way that I see it now is that what he actually resents and hates and wants to destroy is how much he needs us. And he resents that. The hatred isn't really of woman, it's of his longing for her because it feels humiliating to him. He wants really to dissolve back into that primal warmth of the Great Mother, where the annihilation of himself um, gets to happen, from the false self that gets constructed. And so that longing in him is being inverted when he's trying to act it out with a woman outside of himself instead of expressed inside of himself in the activation of his inner feminine. And so what he can't admit around that gets expressed outwardly as contempt for women. And the man who hates women the most ferociously is often the one who is most devastated by his need for her. I have found that to be true over and over and over and over again. That drive to be merged with woman isn't simply sexual, it's that reenactment of the original state. So for the uninitiated man, sex becomes the only available portal to him, to that pre-separation bliss, which is why it gets so charged and becomes so compulsive. And it's loaded with meaning for him far beyond what any individual woman can carry. And this is where the general normalized paradigm of patriarchal sex comes into view beyond the online rape academy. Because a woman can't possibly satisfy what is being asked of her in what he's needing and why he's trying to consume her so much. Because what is actually being asked is not really about her at all. And when she inevitably fails to deliver what he is craving at that deep ache compulsion level, because she is just a human, she's a person, and she is a separate self to him in her own right, the man's disappointment around that tends to escalate into rage and even violence. The only resolution in the way that I see it is something that's rare and difficult, and that it's a man who can get himself to the place where he can feel that longing for merging without being destroyed by it. A man that can be with a woman's body and presence as something that resonates with his deepest origins without trying to make or demand that she actually be his mother, his origins. So the man that can consciously relate to that dimension is going to find his way there through meditation, through genuine love of mutual respect beyond patriarchal sex, or, the awe of nature, or something that awakens him, where he no longer needs to enact it out on an unconscious or unwilling woman's body. So this is why the "she's not looking" tagline worked so well, because it's promising like a temporary release or vacation from that internal watcher of the mother, the female maternal gaze. And it gives the boy in him a moment where he can breathe without being seen and judged by the first person whose seeing ever mattered. And the loop in this is the transgression and the feel of thrill of the woman's absence with the feeling of shame in her implied presence. She's there, but she's not there. And then the transgression again to escape the shame that he's feeling about what he's doing. And that's the psychological dynamic underneath it, this compulsive sexual unconscious behavior. And the only thing that metabolizes shame is being seen in the shame and not being abandoned. Nothing else can reach it. This is known in therapeutic spaces that shame can only thrive in isolation. So when shame is being seen and the person is not being made wrong and bad for it, there can be the actual true release that they're seeking. But again, this is something that needs to be therapeutically held, spiritually held. It can't be all on the one human individual woman to act as therapist, to act as sex worker, to act as spiritual guide, to act as all of that without any real referencing or presencing of herself. It doesn't happen like that. It needs a transpersonal container. And when I saw that one of the men involved in the CNN expose that he killed himself, this makes sense in this context because that is shame. And to unlearn all of this, a man is going to need a corrective relational experience at some point with someone who can hold what he's bringing without turning away, without flinching, without abandoning him. And this is often the attraction for men to see sex workers. And I can tell you for sure that regular married men do that a lot more than what women think, because that person is acting in that transpersonal role for them. But it can also be a therapist, it can also be a genuine friend. It can even be a romantic, conscious partner that's offering a transcendent context for the relationship if they've done enough of their own inner work to not be destroyed by what he's bringing. It can be a spiritual community. It can be whatever cracks him open. And there's two more main points to all of this that I won't elaborate on right now in this episode, but I'll name what they are. And it's about what I've alluded to already in effective erotic initiation from an embodied woman. And also, which I haven't said so much of about yet, which is the nature of romantic relationship. If there were transformation in both of these areas, um, this is what can take us all way beyond the cycle of abuse, in my opinion. And also, the definition of the mother wound is being misunderstood by both men's groups, and also women. This is something that can also help transform this situation. And it's all of this, everything that I've shared here today, everything that you just heard, this is why I focus so much on women, female alignment and embodiment, because without woman being really whole and thriving in her true place, everyone is suffering. And this is why I've been helping women to come into resonance with the deep feminine embodied reality through the Tigress path for decades. And at this point now, after having heard everything that you have, I am curious about what you were feeling coming up in this transpersonal inquiry about the incidents published by CNN. Because I can tell you that for me, it does create compassion from a deeper understanding, and that directs me to how this can be applied to help reduce violence and end violence against women. So, like I mentioned right at the start, this is not about bypassing. I believe the full freaking weight of the law should be coming down on these men for their cruel and pathological and criminal behavior against these women. So that fact for me remains alongside this other inquiry here. And what I want women who might be hurting right now to know, and if you're feeling the ache of mistrust in men, I would love for you to remember that what is also true is that they can't get enough of us. They need us. And even their abuse is a bizarre form of worship in a twisted way. You know, the cosmic mother, the divine mother is God to a child. We are the representation of that on earth as women. So, yes, men must learn how to relate with us as autonomous human beings. That is their quest. And for us as women, what do you imagine that offering the real thing of initiation would take from you? And what I've learned is that it takes much more than what women in the sexuality field have come to for the most part. It's not that we as women are all the way there and it's just the men that got a really long way to go. There's actually more development both ways, in different ways, even for the women who claim to be practicing conscious eros. So I'm going to need to leave it on that cliffhanger there and come back to those subjects to elaborate on, because this is our liberation, this is our freedom, this is true feminine leadership. And this does have the power to truly prevent violence. And I am very passionate about that. So, for now, here at the end, I would love to hear what has stood out to you the most from listening to this. I want you to know that you're really welcome to share it with me, to reach out or comment wherever you see this podcast episode posted. And I look forward to sharing with you more on the next episodes.